As well as connecting to a web URL which contains data, Power BI also allows you to connect to a web page and to import data from any tables within the page itself. Let's look at the scenario that we'll be working with. In 06, connecting to web data, let's open travelbudget.xlsx. And here we have an Excel file that shows the travel allocation for each of our on-the-road staff. This fictitious company operates in 5 countries, and the budget local figure in column G is in the local currency for each individual. So on row 7, Florismart Lepage is based in Canada, and therefore that figure is in Canadian dollars, while Lisa Hill on the row below is based in the US, and therefore her budget figure is in US dollars. And what we want to do is to connect to a web page which contains currency conversion information so that we can convert the local figure into each of the 5 currencies relating to the countries in which we operate. If we open up the file called 02 Connect to a web page, you'll find the URL of the page that contains the currency exchange rates. And here you can see, by a happy coincidence, we have all the exchange rates that we need for the 5 currencies that we operate in. To complete our scenario, if I can also ask you to save the Excel file, you'll notice that we have a couple of formulas within the table which are using the today function. So that will ensure that we are always looking at the next 3 months. I'm recording this video in February of 2020, and therefore, as soon as I open the file, the next 3 months are indicated as March, April, and May. So if you just hit the save button, whenever you're watching this video, you'll always be looking at the next 3 months starting from that date. So I have the URL on my clipboard, so I can close this file, and let's now open up the PBIX file, 02, connecting to a web page. And let's begin by importing our Excel file. And let's connect to the travel table and click Load. And now let's connect to our web page. So Get Data, Web, and we can just paste in the URL. And we're now given an opportunity to supply any required credentials. And because this is a public web page, we won't actually be needing any credentials, so we can just leave Anonymous selected and click Connect. Power BI then shows us a preview of any tables it finds on the page itself, and it's up to us to identify the table that contains the data that we want. And in this case, it's the one at the top with the very long name. You'll notice also that in the navigator, you have the option of switching to web view, and this gives you a preview of the page that we saw in the browser earlier. And you'll notice that one of the things that we'll have to contend with is the fact that as we scroll down the page, the headers are repeated for our convenience. So it's convenient on the web page, but not so convenient for data analysis. So we'll need to remove those headers as part of the transformation process. So having identified the table that we're interested in, let's now go ahead and click on Transform Data. And we'll begin by renaming the query. Let's simply call it Exchange Rates. Next, let's delete the first 2 columns, which we won't be needing, because we'll be identifying the currencies using the 3-letter ISO code. And next, we can use the first row as headers. And now we can think about removing these repeating headers. And there are a number of approaches that we can take. So for example, while these columns are still of the text data type, we can filter out any text that they contain. So the GBP column will contain GBP. We can simply scroll down and deactivate that. And obviously we can do the same thing on any of the columns. Another trick that is useful to have in your arsenal is to simply convert all of these columns to number, in this case decimal number. And any text that they contain will then become an error, and you can simply remove errors. And this trick is quite useful where the text that occurs is not always the same. So in this case it's quite an easy problem to deal with, but let's take the more sophisticated solution, because as I've said, it's a useful technique to remember if you've got a column that should contain numbers or dates, but sometimes people actually put comments, particularly random comments, into those columns. You simply convert all the columns to a numeric data type, and then all of those comments will become errors, which you can then remove. And remember, if you're clicking on the indicator in order to change the data type, if you have multiple columns selected, you'll need to hold Control while you click on the indicator. So we need decimal number. We'll replace current. And then all of our headings now become errors. So we can now right click and remove errors. So we now have access to all the data that we need. We have our original travel budget data, and we now have the exchange rates in a format in which we can use it to convert our local budget figure into the 5 currencies for the countries in which we operate. So for the moment, let's close and apply. Then let's save our changes. And in the next video, we'll move on to use this data in a quick practice session.